Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone to the November meeting of our Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee of the Community Board. My name is Paul Goldstein, Chair. Hopefully joining us will be Andrew Zelter, our co-chair. And also with us, besides the many members of the committee, is Diana Sweetai, who's our Director of Land Use and Planning. So with that, let me introduce Jonathan Boulware, who is the President and CEO of the Seaport Museum. I think many of us know him, but welcome aboard. And Jonathan is going to update us on what's happening. We know a lot has been happening, but interested in hearing the latest. It's all yours, Jonathan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you this evening. It's good to see friends and friendly faces from the Seaport for a long time. I actually just celebrated, I actually kind of missed it, but it turns out that November 2nd was my 10-year anniversary here at the museum. Time passes quickly, it turns out. But glad to be here and glad to be able to catch you up. I'm going to share some season highlights. And I think I want to do a little bit of context, if I may, before that, just to talk a little bit about the museum and where it fits in the world. Now, I know many of you know this, but in the event that any of you don't, I want to put a little bit of this into context. So I'm going to show a couple of images, but really tell you a story. These images will support what I have to say. So I'm actually on the other side of this building right now in the Low building. This is Scrumhorn Row, which is really the centerpiece of not only the Seaport, but of the Seaport Museum. It's the first, that was the largest building in the city of New York when it was built, and we think of it as New York's first World Trade Center. It is among the most important buildings in the city to the story of how the city became what it is, a city that grew from a port to a city. It is a metropolis and a global and cultural capital because of what began here on the East River waterfront. And we do our work in these historic spaces that, as you know, have been covered with 9/11 dust and flooded by Sandy and hit hard in 2008 and again in COVID, which I'll touch on briefly, but spaces that are irreplaceably precious and that afford us an opportunity to look through a particular lens at the city of New York. And that's really how I think about the museum is, yes, it's a maritime museum. Yes, we have vessels, but fundamentally it is a perspective on the city of New York. And we do the work, on the streets themselves, in the printing offices that we have on Water Street and the Thompson Warehouse, which is in the middle of a renovation in Scrumhorn Row, which, as many of you know, is still largely closed post-Sandy, although I'm pleased to say that we have kicked off, finally, at long last, we've kicked off the architectural design that will lead to the FEMA work, which is one phase of several for how the Scrumhorn Row spaces will reopen. So progress, still challenges ahead, but progress. And I think one of my favorite things about our museum is that we do a lot that is sort of the handling of artifacts in various ways. And it's predicated on the idea that we're preserving not just artifacts, but also skills. So in this case, this is a letterpress printing expert with some visitors. And in this case, they're talking about letterpress printing, which is an ingredient of the port mechanism of New York. We do the same thing on our fleet of ships. And part of the idea, and it's a little romantic, I realize, but part of the idea is that, 50 years from now, museum is 54 years old now. So let's say 54 years from now, there will still be a fleet of ships, but also people who know how to sail them. There will still be printing presses and people who know how to operate them. We don't dress in tri-corner hats or smoke curved pipes and pretend it's the olden days. We actually are using these things in real time, and we're preserving the skills for how to do them. And I had to point to a single thing about our museum that's my favorite. I think that's it. And of course, probably most widely known is our fleet of ships on Pier 16. To the right, the 1885 sailing ship Wavertree. To the left, the lightship Ambrose. In the center, a pilot house from a New York Central steam tugboat. Here, some of the fleet of ships, very rare underway family photo in New York Harbor from 2016 when the Wavertree returned from a huge multi-year shipyard preservation project. And on the right, the schooners Letty Howard and Pioneer. Not shown so far is W.O. Decker, which I'll get to in a moment. And then behind the scenes, and this is the part that really I would say most of our work is focused on right now, is a collection of 28,000 artifacts, some 65,000 pieces of printed material, ephemera, and our collection ranges from, I picked a sample photograph here, but our collection ranges, well, I like to think of it as the maritime crown jewels of New York City. And it is paintings of ships. It is scrimshaw art on whalebone teeth. It is sextants for navigation. It's navigational charts. It's early maps of New York. It is ship parts. It is parts of buildings within the district. It is a huge painting of Dutch New Amsterdam based on the Castello plan, and on and on and on. 28,000 objects that are in carefully protected storage on the upper floors of our spaces in the Scrumhorn Row block. And then there are the spaces themselves. And since the late 1960s, early 1970s, the museum has been a steward for any number of spaces. Our footprint now is different from what it was many years ago, but we have the privilege of operating within warehouse and commercial spaces that really are the foundation blocks of what we think of as New York. In fact, even our building names, Scrumhorn and Lowe and Phelps, are the antecedents to Lehman and Morgan and Chase. They are canonical names of what built New York. Scrumhorn being the Peter Scrumhorn, a descendant of the original Dutch immigrants and who built Scrumhorn Row speculatively from 1810 to 1812. Why does that matter? Well, because he built an enormous building speculatively. He built an enormous building with a model, very little business model associated with it. And so it speaks right to the enthusiasm and the opportunity and the ambition that was present on the East River waterfront in the early part of the 19th century. That is an essential New York story. A story that if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere, flows directly out of Peter Scrumhorn building a building on the East River waterfront speculatively. So I obviously can go on about this all evening, but I'll move right to kind of current events here. So I mentioned a little bit that COVID was a setback. It was a setback for everyone, and all of the calamities that I mentioned earlier have had impacts on not just us, but on other institutions. But I will say it's not funny, but it is a little comical that in 2019, as we were planning our 2020 year, knowing that some of the spaces within Scrumhorn Row were not going to be accessible to the public in a conventional way because of vertical transportation and FDNY and DOB limitations around the post-Sandy infrastructure damage, we decided to sort of borrow a page from another favorite museum of mine in the city, the Tenement Museum, and to do a tour-based model and to take people up into Scrumhorn Row using this tour-based model. And we had begun to develop that curriculum and to hire guides who would also be trained as fire guards, so we could sort of do a compliance and educational component. But to say that another way, our business model for 2020 was that we were going to gather 15 or 18 people and bring them into a small, confined, low air circulation space to breathe on each other for 45 minutes. So needless to say, by the middle to end of March of 2020, it was clear that that model was not going to work. And we were pretty invested in that in terms of staff and resources. And immediately, we, along with the rest of our cultural institutions, closed. We did a bunch of pivoting. We went through some very, very difficult times. We had 26 full-time staff in 2019, probably 110 people on payroll, counting part-time and seasonal people. And in the nadir of our staff levels at the pandemic, we were as low as 17 people. Now we are at 15 or 16 full-time and maybe 55 full-time, sort of part-time included, right? So 55 total. So we're still half the size that we were in 2019, but we are growing incrementally. And here's where I'm going to pivot to the positive, because I really, really thrilled with what a huge success 2021 has been. So really briefly, in 2020, toward the sort of end of the summer, we resolved to open our public spaces. Now, remember, this is when we were washing our groceries in bleach, right? So we didn't really know how the virus was transmitted. Nobody was wearing masks, but we decided we were going to open the public spaces. We'd open the ship. We'd open the pier. We took the content that we were intending to put into our galleries and we put it into fixed signage on the pier, which I'll come to in a moment. And the result was there's an obvious one, right? We made the ship free and available to the public, in part because we wanted to be of service to the city. We wanted to be able to provide a place for people to come, and that worked. But what I was not, if I'm to be completely honest, I was not anticipating was the diversity, the dimensionality of people who came, geographic diversity, economic diversity, primary language diversity, ethnic background, national, nation of origin, borough, state, et cetera. We weren't seeing international tourists, obviously, but we broadened our constituencies in nearly every way imaginable. And that was a modest year, but when we entered 2021, still very much in the thick of the pandemic, we resolved to really lean into this as a premise. And I am upwards of 23,000, we're approaching 24,000 visitors. Like I said, we're past 24,000 visitors in Wavertree this year with tours of Ambrose. So we opened the ship to the public. People are going down into the hold. They're looking at the interpretation that's on board, and they're coming from all over the place. They are pre-registering in advance. They're walking up. And the success of that has meant that we've connected with an entirely new group of people. And also, as I said before, new dimensions of people. I mentioned earlier that we immediately put this content that we had developed for the interior exhibitions out on the pier. And we also pivoted to online programming. Again, that's not unique to us. Many cultural institutions did so. We also leaned in on places that we could support the programming that we are good at uniquely, the artifacts and skills piece. So on the left, you see a printing demonstration being done behind plexiglass. This actually, I can't tell you whether this is this year or last, I think this year, but these are ongoing. We launched an online shop, allowing the bound letterpress operation to continue to provide the services that it does to people in New York, which is an unusual, and as I said, guided tours of Ambrose, which lightship will be the subject of a capital project in the near future, which is I'm really pleased to say. And our tugboat, W.O. Decker, the one vessel I haven't shown you yet, the last surviving New York-built wooden tug, is active once again. And so we were operating public trips. We have trained captain and crews. Here again, artifacts and skills. The ship is an artifact. The skill for operating a tugboat in New York Harbor is the skill. And so we have these people that we've brought up from deckhand to mate and mate to captain. And those folks are operating Decker as a passenger vessel on excursions in New York Harbor. She will do so again in 22. And Pioneer is back. For those who know Pioneer, she's an 1885 schooner, functions as a floating classroom and as a training ground, has probably manufactured more new sailing mariners than more than any other vessel in the U.S., or maybe more than in the top 2 or 3 people who've gotten their license and are actually working commercial maritime. So that's a very unusual thing for a museum to be doing. But Pioneer's back, and in 2022 she will be busy. She will be active. So that's very exciting. And of course, our volunteer program, which has existed for all of the years of the museum, is robust still, logging thousands of hours. We do unusual things with our volunteers. In other words, they're not just taking tickets or pointing out the coat check, but as you see, there are 2 volunteers up in the rigging of Wavertree. Each of these 2 particular volunteers celebrated 40 years of volunteering this past summer. And so it's great to see the longevity you see in that, why people really, there's a real tenacity to this museum. And then we leaned into partnerships. You will see on the left, we participated in City of Water Day, in the middle, a mobile vaccine clinic when that was really necessary to reduce barriers for participation for the vaccine. Arctic the Blue Line, which was a projection on the east face of the AA Low building, you can see on the right. We partnered with On-Site Opera on an opera that was maritime and enslavement focused, with a predominantly Black cast and a Black director and predominantly Black musicians, an African-American led effort. I would say not, I wouldn't say it was a fun show to watch, but it was very, very powerful. I hope that some of you were able to see it. And then further partnerships, the schooner Apollonia bringing in cargo. You maybe, if you were on the pier for Halloween, we did pumpkins that this cargo schooner brought down from upstate and painted those. We worked with a Miami-based artist, Kareem Fletcher, who did a George Floyd-inspired series of work. We worked with him to mount that exhibition in the district, and then participated with the illumination of both Wavertree and the Titanic Lighthouse on Tribute in Light on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So that's a lot about direct programming. Then we took that collection, which, 28,000 artifacts held, in careful trust, but we were able to put that online incrementally. So we're putting new bits online all the time. You can find this on our website, explore the collection. You can find all kinds of new things, and we continue to put new things out. So keep an eye on that. Now, virtual programming was interesting for us, and I'll just spend a moment on this. Right as soon as the pandemic hit, some of our public schools, our faithful, regular attendees came to us and said, what are we going to do? We really rely on the Seaport Museum for particular aspects that we simply can't do anywhere else. And so our education team put together online programming, and like the Wavertree decision, we decided this was the moment to make sure that we were being of service. And so we put it online, and we made it free and available to New York City public schools, and we had outstanding participation. We produced online programming, which included things like our popular sea shanties, which this was an interesting confluence of events. I mean, we used to have, 30, 40 people that would gather on the Wavertree for sea music. As soon as we went online, it was 150 or 170 people. And then the TikTok Wellerman craze took over, and it was, 500 people. And then the New York Times covered this particular thing in the context of Wellerman, and we had 750 people. So our reach there, not just in terms of numbers, but also geography, there were people from South America, the American West, Europe calling in for our sea shanty sing here in New York. So we will continue, I suspect, to have some sort of hybrid model for this, because it's truly been a remarkable broadening of our reach. I mentioned this already, online resources for teachers and parents. And right now, outdoor school trips are back. We've just opened those up to schools, and we're going to begin welcoming students back to our ships and to our pier outdoors any minute now, which I'm really looking forward to. In the context of all this, we've also landed some really amazing support pieces. We've got a National Endowment for the Humanities grant. I will say that's the first time we've been awarded such a thing while I have been here, so I'm really proud of that. And we worked with Pace University and brought in 5 students who worked in both collections and in the printing offices. And then we've been really working hard on what I'll call sort of earned marketing. We went really deep on press. On the upper right there, you'll see I've got Roger Clark from New York One coming out with me in the tugboat. In the middle there is Anna Frankel, our VP of External Affairs, speaking to media, and she also spoke to a Russian language publication. Anna speaks Russian and I do not. So now we have that audience that is going to know of the Seaport Museum. And then in the lower right is me having a not entirely embarrassing interview in Spanish on New York One Noticias, talking about the Seaport Museum. And, here again, really pleasant surprise. We started immediately to see a Spanish as primary language audience coming to find us here at the Seaport Museum. So in the context of the many challenges that we are facing, I'm going to try to close out this screen share, which I can't seem to do here. So anyway, what I want to wrap up with is that okay, good, thank you. I needed to have it done for me. So we're a museum that's 54 years old, right? Founded in this district, founded to provide this window into New York City as a city that grew out of a port. It has been through many, many challenges. I will tell you that in this moment, what I just reported out to you, I probably a year ago would not have been optimistic we would be reporting out. The successes numerically are excellent. The successes in terms of breadth of audience are excellent. And our staff, which is intact and capable, continues to build on that work. We're already planning for 2022. We anticipate that we will continue to offer free programming in the way that we're doing, but we're also planning to open some new things as well, with both of our vessels operating, Pioneer and Decker, on the harbor, and with the Thompson warehouse opening, I expect sometime in the middle of 2022 with an exhibition in it. We will then have nodes of operation at Pier 16, at 12 and 14 Fulton Street, and over on Water Street with both the printing offices and the Thompson warehouse. So we emerge from the most recent setback, I think stronger, honestly, than we were, let's say 3-4 years ago. Setback to be sure, but this is a tenacious place. We're a tenacious bunch, and I'm looking forward to reporting back to you in 6 months or a year to talk to you how we are doing along that track for our progress for 2022. And I just want to wrap up by saying again, thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening.
That was great. It was very informative, and it's good to hear that progress is occurring. Good work. Congratulations. Glad crowds are coming back. Let me open it up for any questions or comments from committee members. Does anyone have anything for Jonathan related to this or anything else? Okay. Richard.
I have a question, Paul. So I have Bruce Ehrman would like to be brought over as a panelist. Diana, sorry.
I just moved him over.
Hey, Jonathan. Hi. Great presentation. Just two questions. One is programming and the other is economics. On programming, I'm just curious where the sort of remains of those earlier ships that we've sort of talked about briefly over time in 2010 at the World Trade Center, and then back in the 80s on the Water Street site. Whatever happened to those, and where are the sort of detritus of those housed, and the anchors? And I know one went to the Museum of the City of New York, but is that part of your archive?
So
any of that?
I'm gonna have to get back to you for a comprehensive answer on that. I think there are a couple different buckets. We used to have an archaeological collection that we no longer have. It predates me. I am aware of the World Trade Center ship, and I can't tell you about its disposition at the moment, but it's certainly something. That answer is readily available, and I can have our director of collections, brief me so I can brief you, or send something along to you. We also, I didn't mention this at the time, and some of this may be some of the same collection, but our artifacts are also sort of distributed throughout the district. So as you're in the Seaport district and you find, bollards, the things that you tie ships up to, or anchors in the street, they're most likely ours. Here's a little Easter egg, which I guess I knew a long time ago, but I forgot, but I'm sort of delighted by, is that there is a piece of, I don't know if it's granite or soapstone or something like that, at the corner of Fulton and Little Water Street. So directly east of the Titanic Memorial Lighthouse, where the Guest Jeans place used to be. And right at the front of that store is a box made of stone of some sort. And it turns out, A, it is a museum artifact, and B, it is a horse watering trough. So the next time you're in the Seaport with your horse.
Right. Well, yes, we'll do. I know I'm actually asking it because I think that given what's coming ahead at 250 Water Street in terms of potential archaeological finds, we should be really vigilant to know, one, what happened to that 18th century Caribbean, as it's described, merchant ship, but in fact, probably a slave ship that was found. And we never really, that was years ago, of course, when the digging up for 175 Water. But it'd be, it's important that we really, one, trace what happened to those and just know more about what is archived there. And two, just keeping an eye out on how we start to review what's going on. And so on 250 Water Street, I can't imagine not having a moment for you to sort of update us on what was, in front of us not so long ago in terms of the new development for new portions of the museum. You may have mentioned, I'm sorry, I had to run out for a minute. So did you already brief everyone on that?
Not yet, but I want to hear where we are on that too.
Okay, so. Thanks. Those were, thanks.
So is there a specific question?
Well, I could ask one.
Sure.
$50 million was the number bandied about for the museum. The recent information we're hearing is 40 million from the sale of air rights from Howard Hughes, 10 from the city. So are you confident that that deal is coming together and will be together before the council vote?
So yeah, good question. So I think the first thing I'll say, just by way of context, is that, and many of you for whom this is not news, but the museum supported that effort on the basis that the exercising of an air rights transfer within the district was in the DNA of the district in the first instance, and that the mechanism that's proposed for this place was intended, as it was initially done in the 70s, to benefit the museum. There have been a number of false starts on that, as you well know, including the Rouse deal of the 80s, which did not generate money for the museum. So I think it is right and just for people to be paying attention to the details here. I can tell you that I think it is not going to, such a project happening at 250 Water is not going to move forward without that $50 million being inuring to the benefit of the museum. It's not 40, it's 50. It's intended to be 40 in a designated fund, an operating fund, and 10 in capital. That's been the framework for a long time. I can't speak to likelihood, but I can tell you that I am very confident that that is not moving forward without that being in place. I think that it's beyond my field of view about the likelihood of approvals. But what is not beyond my field of view is that there is no way it is moving forward without that that promise being fulfilled. That's my view.
And just one follow-up. Do you know the timing of when you will actually receive the funds? Will that be tied in any way to Howard Hughes getting a building permit or anything like that?
Yeah, I can tell you that I have been very clear on this point right from the beginning that this has to be on the barrelhead. Right? It has to be a if we're going to have anything to do with such a thing like this, it has to be done properly. It can't be open to mischief, and so it's got to be right away.
Okay, let me call on a few others who have their hands up. I'll go in order that I see them. Richard Corman.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And thank you, Jonathan. Real great presentation. Yeah, for sure. And good to see that it's coming back to life. I was really interested in the opera that you put on. It was, I wish I'd known about it, but it certainly raises the question that a number of people have been speaking of for quite some time, which is the importance of the slave trade to the founding of the city, sad to say, and the importance of that to the waterfront and the harbor. And so, what are you thinking of in terms of future partnerships, future programming that really addresses that part of the history of our city, the history of our country?
It's a really a great question, Richard, and one that's definitely been very much on our minds. It's I mean, it's in regular discussion at the staff and board level. I will say that between the two things I mentioned, namely the Kareem Fletcher art piece and the on-site opera, I would say, just clarification, we didn't put it on, we sort of hosted it. We were a partner, but the credit really goes to on-site opera for the production and so on. And then, of course, we work regularly with the Black Gotham experience and Kamal Ware, who is our neighbor and collaborator here in the Seaport. So I think this is I will say incremental steps for us. I think we have a long way to go to answer the question you have posed and to be equal to the task of illuminating what is the ugly truth, not just about New York, but about the United States. And indeed, I feel the burden of that responsibility of not only doing that, but doing it responsibly. In other words, I am personally, and therefore as the president of the museum, interested in revealing that theme, not just the existence of enslaved people here in New York, but the fact that people were brought here in chains, that people were sold on Wall Street. Much of the physical remnants of those are gone now. I mean, if you find the slave market on Wall Street plaque, it's not only not in the correct place, but it's a plaque that's amid office towers. So it's without context. I think the Seaport Museum must bring that forth. I do want to do it in a measured way and in a responsible way, and that may mean that we are not doing it, immediately in 2022. But my view is that there needs to be, what we use internally here when we think about programming, is we think about it in terms of lenses. So a particular programming lens that we might bring to bear. My view is that the lens of the role of enslaved people and those trades that fed that maritime occupation, which was slaving, things like cotton and sugar and molasses and rum, and the people themselves, that has to be a lens that is ever present in our programming. Because the fact is, I have, one of the things I really enjoy about my work is that I get to be an enthusiast about New York City, and I get to do it through a lens that's one that I love, which is maritime. And I have, to be entirely candid, always thought about that as a sort of a glorious story, how a city rose from a mere trading port to the financial capital of the world. But the ugly truth of that is that it has been done on the backs of people, on the backs of African people, on the backs of the Lenape who were here before the Dutch, and there are more. And so I feel acutely that burden. And so the answer is a resounding yes. And at the same time, I want to set reasonable expectations that you should not expect us to be a leader in that field in 2022, because I feel very acutely that we must be responsible about how we bring it forth, and that we need to bring it forth with people who have the capability to guide us in ways to do it appropriately. I hope that's a satisfactory answer, even though it's tempered.
Does
Well,
anyone
I would
know
just,
where the raise hand feature is on, on an iPhone for WebEx?
All right, Bruce, go ahead, but I
no,
know Richard wants to continue as well.
I
Richard,
just,
why
yeah,
don't you go first, then I'll call on
but
you, Bruce, to follow up.
I was just, responding to your answer, Jonathan. So I appreciate your care about it, and also your, certainly stated concern, and I respect that. But I would encourage you to take a more aggressive approach than what I think I just heard. The time is now. We've all learning that in our lives and in this country, and so certainly you don't want to do anything foolish or rash or inappropriate, but I really would encourage you to be more aggressive. And I would ask that when you come and talk to us, that you report on this as well as all of the other things that you're working on. So that's my request to you.
That's fair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Bruce, are you commenting on this specific issue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then go ahead.
Can you hear me? Because I'm
Yes.
never did this on iPhone before. So I have two questions regarding this, and it may not be what you call this specific issue because I didn't see the whole presentation on my phone. Number one, I was a consulting party for the community board to the federal Section 106 process at the World Trade Center site, which looked for and codified any important archaeological artifacts that were at the site. And we discussed this a few minutes ago. This is a large historic field, large historic site, and it is landmarked. Is there any federal Section 106 trigger here where there's a really official government oversight on archaeology? Number one. And number two, and it dovetails into our next agenda item, how many people of color between staff and the board are on the Seaport?
Bruce, I don't have those numbers for the latter question. I don't have those numbers available to me right now. We are not monochromatic, but we have a long way to go. We're not monochromatic at the board or staff level, but we have a long way to go. That's a fact. On your former question, I'm not sure what site you're referring to.
Oh, I guess you can't answer that. That would be 250 water site, okay? And that's not directly bearing here. Thank you.
Okay. Let's continue with David Sheldon. And let's see. Kathy, were you still on looking to comment? No, I don't see her. All right, David, go
Put my
ahead.
hand down, yeah.
Okay, thank you. David?
There we are. Okay. First of all, thank you for being here tonight, Jonathan. You had alluded to the final use of the FEMA allocation. I'm going to assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that that will be used in Scrumhorn Row. Could you
Correct.
advise us how that FEMA money is to be used?
Well, the answer is, I mean, it's a little complicated, but
Yeah.
let me do it this way. So the FEMA money is not a grant. It is an eligibility for reimbursement, which means that we have to spend up to, I think it's $12.4 million. And then we are eligible to submit for reimbursement for a project that is equivalent to that amount, whatever the number is, it's close to that. And then when we are successful, assuming that we have met all of the criteria, we get 90% of that money back. So I'm being specific about that because it isn't simply a grant, and the hoops that we have to go through are considerable. And that is one of the many reasons that it has taken this long to get to this point. The second piece of complexity is it's too small a number for us to address the comprehensive plan that we have for Scrumhorn Row, including the reconfiguration of the museum's spaces with an entrance at the corner of Fulton and South, which I think some of you have seen in prior presentations. So necessarily, it's taking more funding, but the FEMA money has a sort of expiration date. It's not a hard one, it's a soft one, but it exists. And so that drives us into a phasing thing. So what we are doing with, that's background. What we're doing with the FEMA money right now is infrastructure, basically systems, because that allows us to move things out of the scope of what we'll call phase one of the museum's plan, namely the reconfiguration of the galleries within Scrumhorn Row with a new entrance. Take things out that are expensive and reimbursable, but that can be done now. So, and the reason that this is complex for us is that the money associated with the FEMA phase one, some of which is already in place through the competitive city process, takes far too long for it to be combined with FEMA. The FEMA money will expire long before the Scrumhorn Row money can be affected through the city process. That's just a fact of how long it takes. So what are we doing? The simple answer to your question is what we are doing with the FEMA money is a sort of pre-phase one that is focused on systems and infrastructure, things like vertical transportation, climate control, electrical, et cetera.
So when do we anticipate Skirmerhorn Row in any portion other than the lobby being available to the public as exhibit space?
I will have to get back to you on that, David. That timeline is not solid yet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, what I do want to say on that point, though, just so that I want to point out that we are at about 80% of a $12 million restoration of the Thompson warehouse at 213 to 215 Water Street, which will open this year. So, lest it be the conclusion that we are sitting on our laurels here, we are actually doing a capital project that will give us new museum space right away, and then we intend to move on to Scrumhorn Row with that open. So there is a phased process here, but I'll have to get back to you, David, on the specifics on Scrumhorn Row.
Didn't you say earlier Thompson Warehouse would open in mid-22?
Yeah, isn't that what I said?
You just said this year. Okay, just want to.
All right, I'm already thinking about 22. Paul.
Okay. So mid-22 is correct. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Michael Kramer. Michael, we can't hear you for some reason. Still no good. I don't know. Okay. It's not working, Michael. So I guess you're going to have to work on it. I'll come back to you. Okay. Let's go Wendy, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. First of all, great presentation. I'm just curious because on the next Hurricane Sandy front, and obviously you need the FEMA money and all of these things, but you're right in the heart of the flood zone.
Yes.
And I know that you're doing everything you can, but are you, what are you planning to do? I mean, are you going to build something into the wall that you can protect yourself? I mean, or you're just going to take your chances until, the city does something?
Well, so, okay, yeah, I mean, you're asking a really good question. It doesn't have simple answers. And also we have, well, I mean, 3 different locations with 3 different sets of needs, right? So Scrumhorn Row is low, Water Street is higher. And the project that we've just done there in Thompson is very much hardened against the next Sandy. So all of the infrastructure is on the 2nd floor, way up on Water Street. With respect to the historic buildings in Scrumhorn Row, when we're doing infrastructure, we'll be doing the same thing. Everything will be located much higher. That isn't a comprehensive solution for Scrumhorn Row, though. The reality of a building like that, and I was here during Sandy, it was about a year after I started, and our buildings were flooding from the basements before the streets were wet. So the issue in Lower Manhattan is not sheet flow across the surface that then goes into doors and then down into basements. It's the rising water table and the East River pressing in. So there is not a solution to harden the first floor of Scrumhorn Row from a storm surge event like Sandy, other than hardening the infrastructure by moving it up on upper floors. We fully expect during an analogous event, a similar sort of Sandy type event, that Scrumhorn Row will again flood. That said, there is, I would say, so in that respect, we are planning infrastructurally to resist the next Sandy, but we also know that there are limitations to that, which is where the second part of that comes, which is the city. I would say we are not waiting. I serve on nearly every body that has to do with planning for resiliency in Lower Manhattan. And there are, as you know, plans swirling around, some of them very contentious, some of them less so, whether those have to do with raising esplanades or building out into the East River, or temporary dams, which I have a very dim view of. My background as a mariner tells me that will be gotten wrong eventually. If you have to set something up or close something, if human has to do something every time, it will fail sometime. So a more permanent circumstance is going to be needed. And so I say it has no simple answers, because we can do what we can do within our spaces and we can move things to upper floors. But in the end, this is a public work of multi-generational significance that is going to be the burden of New York City and the federal government to be truly effective. That's the only way, in my view.
Yes. I think that what I was, and certainly I agree with you on that point. I think what I was, I should have said, you really made a big impression on me, because I think it was one of your presentations when I first joined the community board, hearing that the water came in from below first.
Yeah.
And then came from above. And I think that's what I'm thinking about. Like, and you probably have very, historic basement construction, stone construction. But I was wondering if you were basically building your own slurry wall or something like that. That was the question. But it sounds like it's just too expensive and too difficult to do. But thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like we could geek out about this topic for a long time, sounds like, but I think the premise with the historic spaces is floodability and hardened infrastructure on the mechanical side. But we're also still in the design process for that. And, there are lots of good examples. I mean, there's some in New York, but they're really excellent examples in the Netherlands and places that have similar kinds of brick structures on waterfronts. So there's a lot to learn out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, Michael, I guess you sent your questions in. So Diana, do you want to read them off?
Sure. This is from Michael Kramer. Gail Brewer testified in front of City Planning that the mechanism for conveying the money from air rights to the museum was not in place. Please be specific as to how this problem was overcome. Will you share any documents with CB1 prior to the City Council vote? Second question, what is the status of the John Street lot in the next year or so?
Okay, well, so I can't speak to Gail Brewer, and I can only speak for the museum. I did come here to speak about program updates, but I will be happy to talk with you about what I know. But really, there's not much more that I can say, Michael, apart from what I've already said, which is that this project that is proposed at 250 Water will not move forward, in my view, without there being an acceptable way for this mechanism to function. So I think that's as good as I can provide you on that answer. On the disposition of the John Street lot, there is a mechanism or a process being developed by which that will find its way back into the museum's leasehold as a part of this more comprehensive thing. As to its, I'm not sure why the specificity about the next year, but my understanding is that that spot, which, as you know, is part of the museum's long-term plan and actually has been for several decades for a new building, will be returned to the museum's leasehold as a part of this larger set of proposals before the city.
Okay, did you answer about John Street?
Yeah, that was that latter part, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, Alice, your hand is still up. Is that from before?
No, I have just some follow-up. Actually, I was also curious about the John Street lot. So I just want clarity. I've always been, it's a little gray to me. So of the 50 million plus or minus, what amount of that would go to the John Street construction? Or is most of this not going towards that? I know we've all been over it. What?
None of the 50 million will go to John Street construction, and I will tell you why. I have alluded to the many struggles of the Seaport Museum over the years, but I will sum it up in one very simple articulation, which is, despite all of the external forces and calamities that have befallen the museum, despite mischief on the part of various entities on the outside, and despite mistakes by the museum, the simple thing that has plagued the museum over its 54 years, which was known when the museum was founded, is a loss or a lack of reliable recurring revenue. So when the prospect of an air rights transfer generated fund for the museum came across my desk, what I plugged that in with was the museum's own 5-year stabilization plan of 2015, which, after a review of countless internal and external consultant-related think projects, interviews. I mean, I've been a student of this museum now for a decade. I've talked to, every living board chair, some of them now deceased, most of the past presidents, and this is the issue we're solving for. So central to my ambitions of the stability of the museum is this fund that provides reliable recurring revenue. And when that is achieved, and when we have opened the spaces in Scrumhorn Row, then we will be on very secure ground to raise money for the John Street building. But I will do that. I will want to be crystal clear, because I want to have expectations very clear. I will do that when and only when we are stable enough to do it. The road to new buildings is paved with deceased museums who did it too quickly.
Thanks very much. That is very helpful, the clarity there. And one other question is a follow-up to Wendy on the resiliency question. So I know you are dutifully at all the same meetings I am for resiliency, and I appreciate it. So the 110 million, again, plus or minus, that the city is giving to the Seaport area to build up the wharf, the 3 to 5 feet. Do you believe this will in some way assure any kind of better bet for the museum or not?
My understanding of the way that this is constructed is it probably won't have an effect on the museum. I'm open to A, learning more, and B, maybe steering that process so that it will. But of course, the bigger question is that 110 million is a drop in the bucket. And, I mean, not that I was asked, but I will say that as polarizing, as sort of unpopular as the concept of building out into the East River was when the idea was first proposed, I'm not as skeptical of it as other people are. I think particularly in the Seaport, there's such a challenge with protecting something where there's so little distance between historic fabric and the actual water's edge. I remain very open-minded about a comprehensive project that narrows the river somewhat. It will have negative consequences, to be sure, but every other idea that's been proposed has far worse ones. If we end up like New Orleans down here, where you're looking up at the river's edge, that's awfully hard to interpret the Seaport Museum in that context.
But it is sobering to hear that this 3 to 5 foot raise is not necessarily going to specifically benefit the museum.
I mean,
yeah.
I should disclaim it a little bit, Alice, just in the in the interest of intellectual honesty, that I don't know that for sure. My quick survey of it seems to suggest that it won't help the museum specifically. It does kind of need to come a little farther south first.
I agree. I hope everyone's going to go Wednesday and Thursday for the rollout of these very plans we're describing by the Lower Manhattan Coast Resiliency Group. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Alice.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands. Let me just ask one follow-up again on the 50 million, which
Sure.
would be, I understand you want to use it to generate income to help the operations of the museum, but does that mean you would not spend any of it on a project like Scrumhorn Row needed renovations?
I would not spend any of the 40 to do that. That's right. The 10 is set aside for capital. I would not invade the 40, and it's a question of fiscal discipline. When I look around the sort of colleagues of museums, the museums that I think of as our colleagues, the ones that are sustainable are their revenues rest on a three-legged stool, and that three-legged stool is comprised of earned income, which we do very well on, contributed income, which we do very well on, and this yield from an investment, an endowment or its equivalent. And that's the leg of the stool that's always been missing. It was intended to come from real estate in various ways. The Rouse deal was supposed to solve it. There's a million stories for how it didn't work. My goal here is to put the third leg of the stool in place and then build from there.
And then you would take the other 10 million and decide your priorities for capital improvements.
Oh, no, I mean, that priority is established, Paul. I'm glad. If I wasn't clear, I apologize. That's to open Scrumhorn Row. I mean, that's to kick
Okay,
off.
so it is Scrumhorn Row.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I registered some disappointment on David Sheldon's face when I said that I didn't have a timeline yet, but the reality is, and those of you who watched the Waiver Tree project happen, I mean, I kicked that project off in 2012. It was already in flight, and we got her back 4.5 years later. So it's really great that New York City has this massive capital infrastructure that cultural organizations can get access to. It is not a rapid process. And so a lot of my attention right now, in addition to landing funding in various buckets in the first instance, is figuring out how to accelerate these projects. And I will point to our success at the Thompson Warehouse, which is going to be done in about 19 months of construction, as evidence that it can be done. It just isn't easy. But to be crystal clear, my priority is opening Scrumhorn Row with those funds.
Great. Okay, I think we've covered it all, and I think.
I have one more question in the chat, if I can read it out.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is another question from Michael Kramer. Pier 16 is supposed to be demolished and rebuilt to 11 feet higher. How and when will this affect the museum?
News to me, Michael. The plan, as far as I know it, in the near term is a redecking. I think having actually legitimately not heard of this before, I will say that at some point, Pier 16 will have to be raised because that's what sea levels are going to do. So much like the concept of building out into the East River, we will be at the table, we'll be front and center in those discussions, and we'll figure out how the raising of Pier 16 is accommodated. I mean, you know the museum well enough, Michael, to know that creates immediately the idea that interesting challenges with respect to heights of vessels and so on, but they are resolvable challenges. So, but news to me. So if you have info on that, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, unfortunately, he can't speak. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Jonathan. I think this has been very helpful. I think very informative, and I'm glad we had a chance to exchange a lot of information and to do it in a somewhat lower temperature environment.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to coming back at your invitation to report out on further work.
I'm sure we will to have you come.
And by the way, if I may, I'm going to ask, I guess I'll make contact with Diana, but there was a mention earlier about, I think it was a question about the opera and not knowing that it was happening. We have actually a really incredible biweekly newsletter that contains all of what we're working on, deep dives into collection stuff. So Community Board One should absolutely assuming your consent, but we'd love to send this so that Community Board One can consume it and It is a rich product. Our staff work really hard on it, and I'd love for you all to know about and participate in our stuff as it happens.
Okay, yes, I'm sure Diana will follow up with you on that.
Great.
Okay, thank you, and you have a good evening.
Hey. Good night.
Okay, thanks. Okay, committee, let's move on to item number 2, which is questions about inclusion and equity. This is an issue that you might have seen has been put on the agenda of every committee to discuss and to offer feedback, I guess, mainly to the executive committee and to the chair. So I'm certainly open to having some discussion on this. Let me just say that I was at a meeting last week of the Land Use Committee where Patrick made a recommendation that I thought was a good one, which was to form a task force for the community board on the issue of equity and inclusion in order to have ongoing discussion and expert guidance to assist us in this topic. And I think that was widely, a lot of people like that idea, but that doesn't mean we're not open to other ideas and suggestions. So I open the floor if anyone would like to have a comment on this topic. Let's see.
I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're recognized, Bruce. Go ahead.
Thanks. And there's background noise, and I'm sorry about that. I do have to leave momentarily. All I want to say is that that the task force sounds like a great idea, as long as it's made up of a proportionate, at least a proportionate amount of people on the board of color. And that's a broad spectrum, but I think that's crucial, number one. And number two, my understanding of what is necessary in terms of the subject is well discussed and defined by Mariama. We've had many conversations on it. And one of the things I have observed is that decisions, resolutions, have to be informed by issues of exclusion, issues of redress, even going into, for instance, landmarks matters. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I got your recommendation on appropriate representation on this task force. Any other comments? All right. I will then close this item down and move on to our third item. And this is an item about the future of open restaurants. Just to quickly introduce, some of you probably saw that city planning just, I think it was yesterday, did approve extending open restaurants into 2022 while acknowledging that a lot of the rules and guidelines are not in place yet. So with that, maybe I'll let Diana just give you an update on where the community board is on this issue. And again, this is another issue that the chair is sending around to every committee to see if there's anything else that anyone wants to add to our discussion of this when it comes back to exec.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Each committee is discussing this. I discussed this with Tammy a little bit this week, and give me a moment. I'll pull up the resolution to remind folks exactly what we voted on. The zoning application itself is interesting and limited in its scope in that it simply to eliminate all of the zoning in reference to sidewalk cafes to make room for a new program through the Department of Transportation, what was once the Department of Consumer Affairs. A whole new set of rulemaking needs to be adopted through those agencies for the future of the program. There's its own discretionary process for that, and there's going to be public comment periods and so on. So while our statement on the zoning itself, and I'll pull it up so people can see exactly what it is pretty limited, there's this whole new world of discussion that we now need to have in terms of what we want to see as part of this program, what we want to see as part of the future rulemaking through Department of Transportation. There's a lot to discuss, and I believe that's why it's on every committee agenda. I know that Tammy had mentioned to me that she would like for this committee to discuss and consider culture and open space opportunities, both as part of this program and how it might affect things like culture and open space to make room for this program. So I'll leave it there now and come back to me in one moment. I need to pull up the resolution to remind folks of exactly where we left off.
Okay, any comments on culture and open space ramifications?
Sure, Alice. I think it came up actually a while back when we were talking about issues concerning equity and the idea that, you know, the restaurant industry takes the whole cake here. And, you know, I guess if like dry cleaners had a sort of strong lobbying group, they might get it, you know. So the idea that restaurants get it all, that's a question that, you know, we keep going over. And I think cultural institutions are a perfect example where cultural institutions should be given the ability to do the same thing. You know, the Flea Theater should be able to put out front when they have performances an ability to serve, you know, their food and liquor, it comes to mind, or certain museums during events and such. So I don't know, it's just something to, you know, in terms of specifics to the cultural, yeah, I do think that that's an area that we might want to consider in reinventing or rethinking our sidewalks. I mean, if they're already going to be privatized in some way or taken over by other industries, why not some of our cultural industries or institutions rather?
Okay. Does the committee generally support that? Anyone object to that? No. Good.
Not at all.
Thank you, Alice. Anyone else, or Diana, you let us know when you're ready.
Yes. I'm just going to read out there are three main bullet points in our resolution on the zoning application itself.
Sorry, Pat, I didn't see you. Do you want to go now or after Diana?
Thank you, Pat. I'll be quick. CB1 opposes the open restaurant citywide zoning text amendment due to the following reasons and urges that the plan does not move forward until these items are satisfied. One, there are far too many unanswered questions and a desire for greater detail, not only on the zoning text amendment, but also on future design regulations and review procedures, including rationale for the timing of this proposed program. Two, additionally, there are unanswered questions and concern as to the timing of this application and why community boards are being put in this position now to review and comment on this major proposal before details of the plan have been decided. And three, CB1 has technical concerns and questions regarding issues such as clearance and clear path requirements, obstructions, requirements for spaces to be level, driveway, curb cuts, etc.
Okay, thank you. So with that, let me call on you, Pat. Can't hear you. You got it. I think you should be okay now. Oh, no. Diana, any suggestions?
Pat, there's a little arrow, or you should have a little arrow next to the mute or unmute button that should allow you to switch your audio settings. That could be something that might work. Otherwise, you can chat your comment to me and I'll read it out for you.
Oh, this is Wendy. I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. You can put me next if Pat can come through.
Doesn't look like Pat is coming through just yet. So why don't you go in the meantime and we'll come back to Pat.
I was just wondering, do we have thoughts about fairness on restaurants that are on corners? You know, I love the Odeon, but they have one of the, I mean, they said they have more seating and they're doing better than ever before because they have, you know, restaurants like them, they put seating on the corner and then also on the sidewalk. Um, I mean, there are some real equity issues in terms of the street. Is that up for discussion?
That was what I wanted to say also.
The corners, say that again. I'm sorry, I was distracted.
So I love the Odeon, first of all, and they've been a huge supporter over the years of Taste of Tribeca, and I can't say enough good things about them. However, I also, one night when I was eating there, they were really crowded and they have a corner lot. So they have, you know, they have two sheds. I don't know if that's what we call them. And then they also had seating on the sidewalk. It was a tremendous amount of just, you know, I mean, it was bigger than their restaurant could seat, I think. And they just said, yeah, things are going great. That, you know, they're doing so well. And, you know, and I was happy about that. I'm happy for them. But I was thinking to myself, you know, it's just the luck of real estate that they're on the corner. And what does that mean for, you know, some restaurants can't have anything because they have a city bike stand outside just by bad luck, or they have a very small storefront, or, you know, it seems very inconsistent. And it seems to me that restaurants that are really doing well, there should be some sort of compensation to the community or to the city, or I don't know what it would be. I do not know the answer to that. And I will tell you first and foremost, I think the Odeon is incredibly generous with the community. So I don't mean in any way for this to be a criticism of them. It just that they're a perfect example of, you know, business couldn't be better because of the pandemic. They've probably had a record year. So, you know, and there's probably other examples. I'm just not having it come to mind. And I don't know if we want to discuss that or not, or if that even matters in this discussion, you know, in terms of some restaurants do get a lot more than others because they're on corners.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Because that was what I was going to bring up, the unfairness of real estate and the fact that some people have frontage on both sides. So Wendy, you and I are on the same page. I mean, I've been to a lot of the meetings, our committee meetings this month, and this has been brought up. Also, the fact not only do they have sheds on both sides if you have a corner lot, but you also then have a sidewalk cafe. So you have a sidewalk cafe and you have seating in the gutter, and how unfair that is. And the city is giving it to them for free. And it isn't that I don't want to see any restaurants succeed. I do, you know, but again, I'm with Wendy. Should the city not be compensated in some way for the fact that they have all of this free, you know, space that they're getting? That's number one. Number two, at Quality of Life, we will be discussing all of the quality of life issues, you know, like there are no regulations for noise, for sanitation, for, you know, rodents, or I don't understand why they have regulations for newspaper stands, but we don't have regulations for the sidewalk sheds. They come in all various sizes and materials. They should all be somehow modular and consistent. And then you can individualize the inside, but the outside should be something that the city regulates, both for fire protection, for drainage, for lighting, for garbage removal. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, is that something that the rest of the committee also shares this view? So I could go back and report that?
I share the view of the equity, but I don't share the view of the unanimity of the features of a of the actual whatever it's going to be, the thing on the street. I'm not sure exactly what the parameters are, but one of the beautiful parts of what we've seen, if there is a beautiful part, is the sort of distinct features of each restaurant kind of been calling out, with various tables and chairs and different kinds of looks. I mean, I think the parameters in the regulations should be very clear as to square footage, to density, what you're describing. I'm not so sure about the look of that. I've seen a few renditions of that by architects, and it's actually a little Stepford wife-y, a little scarily, sort of all the same, and I'm not so sure that would be the answer. So I don't know that I would advocate for that, but that's the vote.
Well,
Anyway.
I would certainly advocate, it's Elizabeth, I would certainly advocate for something to be done about the rats, because that it's a huge problem with these outdoor sheds. And I think we definitely should address that. And some of the other quality of life issues that Pat mentioned too. I mean, these sheds just make the quality of life problems so much worse. With respect to the equity issue, I have a problem saying that these restaurants should be giving the city some sort of cut of, for the good fortune they have of making it through the pandemic. I mean, that strikes me as being sort of a little much. But I do think there is an issue with, the bad luck of the restaurants who have city bike stands right in front of them that can't actually benefit in the way that others do. And I'd like to look into how we can sort of help those restaurants out. It's not fair to them. And that's definitely, something that, if we're looking at equity, that's definitely something that we can definitely, I'd love to look at as well.
Right. So you wouldn't be, you can only have one corner and then you give it to somebody who needs it, that type of thing.
I would be supportive of that. I wouldn't be supportive of, for example, well, the Odeon is making all this money. Wow, let's give some money back to the city or the community or whatever. Like, I think that's a little extreme in my opinion. I mean, there's still a pandemic, and as well as the Odeon is doing, I'm not really sure it's raking in the amount. Listen, I don't know. I'm not counting. I'm not looking at their books.
No,
but like,
I love them, and God bless them if they're making a lot of money. But I think it was just a matter of they have more outdoor seating than they had indoor seating.
Is that?
Some
I don't.
restaurants have none.
Is that even possible? I mean, they have so much indoor sitting. I mean, I'm not sitting there counting tables, and I'm not sitting there sort of asking them to give. We're sort of taking a bad situation. The city is taking a bad situation and trying to make it good for restaurants. And then I'm not sort of nickel and dime every restaurant and be like, well, you're actually.
Well, I think I was more of like,
that's a little odd, in my opinion.
All right.
Yeah.
Could
So
we hear from a few other people?
However, I do think that we should make room for other restaurants to benefit in the same way, particularly if they're disadvantaged.
All right, let's keep it going. Richard, I think you were next.
Yeah, just two comments. To Elizabeth, just to what you're saying, I think we have to think about this short term and then the long term program that they're trying to create. That's a permanent program, which has nothing to do with the pandemic. And there are very different ways we need to look at the restaurants or whoever's getting the benefit of our public space. So certainly in the long term, we have to be careful not to penalize restaurants that are struggling. In the short term, I mean, but in the long term, we've got to think about it very differently. This is public space that we are giving away.
So what are the long-term plans here, though, Richard? I mean, do you know what the situation is long term with these sidewalk sheds?
No, I think that's really the problem, that we don't know. And that's what we're all trying to hammer out here. What does a long-term permanent program look like? Because City Council, from what I understand, passed a resolution or passed a bill that makes this program permanent. And yet we don't know what that really means and how it will be enforced and who gets the benefit and who decides what is going to be occupying our public space. And that was the second comment that I was going to make, which is that somewhere in here, I think, let me just finish that, Elizabeth, and then certainly let me certainly come back to you. Somewhere in here, and maybe this has been said elsewhere, the community needs to or should have some say as to how its streetscape is going to be utilized. And it could be for restaurants, it could be for museums, it could be for theaters, but somewhere along the line, the community should have some participation in these decisions.
Yeah, I
That's all
hear
I
you.
wanted to say, Elizabeth. Sorry.
I mean, my assumption all along has been this is more or less a temporary thing, and that once the pandemic is sort of over, or restaurants are back on their feet again, that this sort of thing, that the city council will pass something that sort of I mean, I can't. I mean,
Yeah, but
it's
that's not the case.
Say that.
going
That's not
on.
the case. They did pass a law that made this permanent.
Permanent,
It-
exactly.
No, I think it
for-
was just
for
city
indefinitely,
planning that
like,
passed that. I think city council has to review it. Is that right,
But
Diane?
we all know that once something goes in, it's hard to get it out. Once
Well,
something is
actually,
actually a program that's up and running, it's hard to then rescind it.
but
that
actually, let's get the facts on this because I could be wrong.
yeah.
Diana, do you know what the situation is as far as the city council is concerned?
They did vote to make the program permanent. My understanding was that it was to a certain year, technically, with an option to extend. Let me clarify that because I know we're discussing tomorrow in executive too, I think. Either way, I'll clarify so we can share that.
Great.
Yeah, I think we need to know
Does
the,
need to
the
vote
legal
on
status of this.
too.
I agree, Richard. If this is so-called permanent, indefinitely, then we've got a real problem here, obviously. But my assumption was always that it's sort of a temporary measure.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get a couple of more people who've had their hands up, a chance to speak. Joe Lerner, then Francis Curtis. Joe, you're next.
Thank you. My thought is once it goes in, the people are stuck. In addition to Odeon, we here at the Seaport has a restaurant there that has the sidewalk, the street, around the corner, the sidewalk, the street, and I'm sure there are many others like it, and it's ridiculous. They have more seating on the outside than inside. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Francis.
Yeah, Joe, I agree with you. And unfortunately, we lost a restaurant, Aqua. They, it was, well, that location, and it became another restaurant. And they had the space of life. They had that whole corner, and they had more space outside than the inside of the restaurant could hold. But anyway, I think my thoughts are that this is just a knee-jerk reaction by our electeds, and we're all saying it's not solving the problem. And they are not, they are reacting to the situation without being responsive and going through everything that we're talking about in terms of defining the parameters and being more sensitive to the big picture. I think that the first measure that they had was only for a certain period of time, and now all of a sudden it's going to be forever, without, as people have said, without consulting the communities or anybody else. So I think that it's just it's an unfortunate knee-jerk reaction by our electeds. And yes, they need to be pulled back and called on the carpet. And our resolution speaks to that. And I'm sure it'll be more in detail as we go along.
Okay. I think I have a good sense of a lot of the concerns and comments that the committee raised this evening. And I think the best way to proceed would be for me and some of the others who are on the executive committee to speak to these issues, and we'll kick it around. And I guess that's the body on the community board that's going to handle this. I'm not sure, land use or this committee, but I guess we'll find out more about that tomorrow at the executive committee meeting.
It's on licensing as well, because then we have the issue about liquor and You know, if they didn't have a sidewalk cafe, now they have a sidewalk cafe, but they don't have a liquor license, but they're serving, you know, it's messy, messy, messy.
The idea, just because I know we discussed it a little bit, Tammy and I, is just, it's to compile everybody's thoughts at each committee level of the concerns that are addressed in each committee and bring them all together in one document, whether it's, I think it's going to be a letter that would then go to Department of Transportation, Department of City Planning, Mayor, whoever it goes to. So I think that was the general idea, and that it would sort of get compiled at executive. Diana, maybe that was my recollection.
That sounds about right. Like I said, there's also going to be a discretionary process and more opportunity for comment as these new rules are voted in and discussed. So it will probably be, I mean, this is a long-term discussion. And like I said, there's a whole world of a new program that needs to be developed here. So it'll probably come in several iterations, probably in a letter, definitely as part of our comment during that public comment period. And all of these things are pieces of the puzzle for us to put together. So all of this input is critical.
Okay, so I've been taking notes. Diana, you always take notes.
Always.
So we will share some of these comments, or as many of them as we can, with the executive committee, or I'll give them to Diana and she'll put it into a format that the executive committee is looking for. And I guess we'll take it from there. I'm sure, as she says, there will be more discussion to come on this. All right. Any other business that anyone would like to take up this evening? All right, seeing none, let me thank you all and wish you a good evening. And we'll see you, we will see you before Thanksgiving, right? Yes. Okay, you all take care.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night, everybody.
Good night.